Christian, thanks for joining us today and taking some time out of Summit to connect. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm good, actually. Yeah, I'm going great.
Great. Look, I wanted to start today by exploring a little bit around your lived experience and asking you some questions focused on that. Just wondering if we can start off, if you can briefly give an overview of what is your lived experience of suicide?
Yeah. So my brother died 4 years ago, and he was in Tasmania when he died, and he suffered from serious mental illness for most of his life. He was 44 when he died, and I could tell over the phone when he was living in England that he wasn't going very well, like he'd gone downhill. So I convinced him to kind of come out and see us, his family, me, my kids, my wife at the time, and my mum. Our mum was here, and so he came out here, and he was here for 6 months before he ended his life. And so there's a lot of gifts in the fact that he met my kids, but there's a lot of sadness around the fact that the service that was there to stop him ending his life didn't stop him. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. You mentioned that you recognised that things weren't right, that just something seemed off with him. Just wondering if you can talk about the journey that you had, like once he arrived in Australia, in terms of trying to get some support or get some help for him.
Yeah, I wasn't working as much. I took some time off work to be there for him, and I went and took him to a doctor, a really good. We did quite a bit of research online and talked to friends about, good doctors who can sort of have a bit of understanding and empathy around mental illness versus just prescribing more drugs. And we did find a good doctor, and he got a new diagnosis while he was here. So he had a new psychiatric diagnosis. So there was a lot of medical intervention, but also, just sort of giving him space to live on our property in Margate. And the unfortunate situation was that he ended up at the adjunct mental health unit next to the hospital, and that's where his care. I mean, it's designed for mental health, but they weren't really able to support him. He had a real sort of psychosis, if you like, around having metal poisoning, like from being an artist and being submerged in different paints. He really thought that he had something toxic going on, and that was what was causing the problem. And also EMF, like electromagnetic field, like Wi-Fi. He had a real thing about obsessing around those sorts of things. And towards the end, he did start to decide. Every now and then he would just go, I don't know if that's really the case anymore. So there were some positive influences happening.
And so when he was in that place, you were trying to advocate, but you couldn't have the voice, or you?
Well, I had alarm bells, because my mum, basically when he was admitted to hospital, my mum was primary carer, the next of kin. They put her down as next of kin, but she's had a brain tumor and she's not 100% all there, and so she isn't really able to see the warning signs of suicide. And I could, through what she would tell me, I could tell, but it wasn't registering with her. So I would call them and tell them about my fear, but they kept saying, you aren't on our file and it's all confidential, so we can't talk to you. And it was that line. It was basically a wall, and I kept coming up against it. So they wouldn't act on the information I had. They didn't believe that I was worth listening to. And so that's why I'm really keen to advocate for change.
When it comes to advocating for change, and particularly around the world of suicide prevention, when we focus on men and supporting men, what do you feel we need to do differently?
I'm very fortunate to be involved in TASMEN. I think it's Tasmanian Men's Health and Wellbeing is the long name, but we call it Tasmen, and they run the gathering, which is actually this weekend coming. And there is a whole bunch of support that we give each other as men who own our story. We're able to basically tell our story and be angry and sad and have all of the emotions, which just even talking about it can be cathartic in itself. And just thinking about your questions before this, I realized that there's a lot of the things that we need already happening. It's about amplifying it. And I know that organization has no money. You know, it runs off a dime, and they run their gathering, and it pays for the funding for their organization for the year and for the event. And honestly, it's like half the work is done if we go and cherry pick all the really fantastic things that are happening for men and fund them, like properly fund them. So like Men's Resources Tasmania that I'm now volunteering, I'm helping with their comms. They just need funding, like to amplify their message, to get more impact on more men. It's really already there. And so I'm grateful that I can lose my brother and have all of these men support me through it because they know my story, and I haven't needed to phone Lifeline as much. I do phone Lifeline from time to time, but yeah, having that network of men who get it, you know, they get trauma and they get shit happens in their life. Yeah, I just want to see more of that.
There's so many good examples of the grassroots kind of programs around the country that do happen, and they do all struggle to really get funding, and instead people fund different programs and try and invent something that's already there. When it comes to education for men, and even starting with boys, what do you feel we can do around that with suicide prevention? How do we start with that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There was a really nice event that we ran. The Men's Resources Tasmania ran a vigil for suicide, and it was a fire pit, and anyone who's touched by suicide could come and share their story. And I feel like it's a very soft point of entry for someone. Like, I could have brought my children, I could have brought my mum, and it's not sort of pointed education. It's just that this is a thing and it exists, can be very powerful for someone who might just be living with it on their own. So that's sort of one area. And then there's, I guess, the things that the focus group that we just heard of earlier, where they've got, you know, they're coming up with a strategy, that being made public and that going into curriculum and that going, like, so very pointedly educating people. So it's a bit like mental health first aid training, or even first aid training. Could we just have mental health first aid training in first aid training? Like, that is also, and then suicide prevention in that. It just sort of, it will just go out into the community using things that already exist.
Or more almost like create introductions into it, and if people want more, they can get it. But at the minimum, with what's there, they're getting a little bit.
Yeah, like with first aid training, you get understanding about a snake bite and what to do, and a bull ant and a jack jumper, and then that's a whole field of education which you can specialise in. I mean, it wouldn't hurt to do a bit of suicide prevention in there, and it's a whole field that then you can educate in. But another idea that is around education of people with lived experience and how to channel that experience. I don't know what it looks like, but training around sort of utilising all these people who've got their experience and how to best pass that on within their workplace, within the school that their children go to, like how to positively affect those organisations. That would be really awesome, because we'll all become people on the ground making the difference, being the change. Yeah.
Almost have them, the people that are doing it, help them to have a little bit more information and be a bit more somewhat aligned, so it's a common message around the place.
Well, if they want to, they can become activists, I suppose. And so once you've done the training, you then know, I can do this at my local I could do this when I go and play tennis, I could put have a framework where everyone's not just having to reinvent the wheel we just know that if you want to be an activist in suicide prevention, here you go. Here's all the resources and what people do. I'd be very up for that. It'd be amazing to have something like a roadmap where I can then make change happen in my community.
Sounds like you've been on quite a journey since your brother died. What are you most proud of that you've been involved in or that you've done?
I'm proud of getting through it, like just being really patient with the grief and knowing that my kids really need me. You know, it's been difficult for me to live my life with the news and the lack of my brother and our family of 4 reducing down to a family of 3, and just, you know, doing my damnedest to be there for my kids, really. And then I'm just really hopeful and excited about where Men's Resources Tasmania might get to, and if we can get some funding just sort of helping with that journey, it'd be awesome.
Brilliant. Well, I wish you all the best for your journey, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Tynan.